What up, though? This is Mongo Slate, and we're here to talk today about the WWE's Lost Generation. Now, a lot of people have been kind of surprised to see that the Lost Generation is making a huge return the last couple of years. But what's the Lost Generation? For starters, the Lost Generation consists of a lot of guys, a lot, too many to name, that debuted in the WWE between 2004, 2005, and 2009. A lot of these guys are should have been top guys in about the 2012, 2011 range, but a lot of them were either gone or de-pushed, buried, or whatever. But they were important guys that are kind of making a big deal now. To give you two examples, one was MVP made a return. MVP debuted in like 2004. He was a top guy at the time. But we're going to get into that. And the biggest one, the biggest reason why this video was made is that Drew McIntyre is actually also one of those guys. And he won the 2020 Royal Rumble. And also, Kofi Kingston is also one of those guys. And he won the WWE Championship last year. So let's talk about these guys. I got about 10 that I named. I think they're about the 10 most notable guys who debuted or really became prominent between 2005 and 2009, and what happened to them? Like why did they fall off? Let's start with MVP first. MVP debuted in like 2004, 2005 as Montel Vitavius Porter, basically like a Deion Sanders high profile athlete gimmick. It was really good. It worked. He got really over as a heel. He was the longest reigning United States champion in SmackDown history or some nonsense. And he feuded with like Kane and Undertaker. And he really seemed to be the guy at around 2007, 2008. And then for some odd reason he was moved from SmackDown to Raw, where suddenly became a babyface, and they were trying to use his real life armed robbery background as kind of a redemption story. So they were saying, hey, MVP has changed and you know changed his ways, and he learned from his mistakes, and everybody else can too, and that fell on his ass. And that pretty much was the end. Like, why did MVP leave? I have no idea. I think that I think I maybe seen in an interview that he just wanted to wrestle in Japan, and he ended up doing that. Ended up becoming the first IWGP Intercontinental Champion. So he lived his dream, and he said he had his last WWE match against Rey Mysterio, which was a terrible match on Raw. I really hate that he would go out like that because he was one of my favorite guys. But I really liked MVP. I thought MVP was dope. I always thought he of the people that I'm going to mention, he's probably the best as far as he could work in the ring, and he could cut promos. You know, he couldn't do all your flippy shits, but he could do the technical stuff. He knew how to work a wrestling match, and he was athletic enough to pull the gimmick off. And I think he could have been a main event world champion guy, but for some reason he just went off the rails and was never able to get back on. So let's talk about the next guy, Mr. Kennedy. If you know who Mr. Kennedy is, you're probably old enough to remember why Mr. Kennedy was so popular and why he's being mentioned. Mr. Kennedy was one of the most popular heel personas in the WWE of the last 20 years. Easily. I mean, you could just, people still do it. He still does the gimmick today, but other people still do it with the Mr. Kennedy. And then, like, he wasn't the best worker in the world, but he had the best mic skills. He could talk. That was the beauty of the Ken Kennedy character, is that he could talk. He was such a loudmouth. And, as far as winning titles and stuff like that, I think he might have been the U.S. champion once. And it meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. He also won the Money in the Bank. That went nowhere because he got it taken away from him because he was injured. And they had Edge pin him for it, which was absolutely retarded. But hey, it's the WWE. Stuff like that happens. But Mr. Kennedy was snake bit from the beginning. For starters, he was kind of labeled as injury prone, and he was also labeled as being an unsafe worker. He had some issues, some backstage issues with like Shawn Michaels and Randy Orton, and a bunch of other guys, and he ended up fucking off to TNA. Well, he ended up getting fired. Then he fucked off to TNA. Then he fucked off to TNA. But he ended up becoming a TNA World Champion. They were doing aces and eights, I think, at the time. So he's in the NWA now, so you can see him on NWA Power. But Mr. Kennedy was an incredibly talented verbal worker. His in-ring stuff wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. He had some pretty good matches with Undertaker. And I remember in a shoot interview, he talked about how much Undertaker liked working with him. And I could see it because he really did work hard in those matches. And he worked hard in his matches with Batista too. He had some pretty good matches with Batista as well. So Mr. Kennedy really could have made it. But the politics and the injuries and all that stuff just kind of shut it all down. And it's not right, but I mean, it is what it is. The next is Carlito. Carlos Colon. I think it's Carlos Colon Jr. He debuted in like 2004. Carlito was another all-around talented guy. He could work technical style. He could work lucha. He had great verbal skills. I mean, he's probably the second or third best talker in this whole list after MVP and Mr. Kennedy. He had fantastic charisma. He had a unique look with the big afro. He had a cool gimmick. He pulled it off well. He was just all around. He was kind of small. He's like 5'8", but he was like all around another of the all around great guys that they just yanked the WWE just yanked the carpet right from up under him. You know, Carlito never really got a main event push ever. You know, so it didn't really matter. He was like the IC champion, and he was the U.S. champion. So he won the Intercontinental Championship, and he won the United States Championship. And you know, he had a notable feud with John Cena, where the whole John Cena got stabbed in the nightclub thing, which was it's funny, but that was the big push, I guess, because he was feuding with Cena and he got killed. But what's some other good things but Carlito had a reputation of being kind of lazy and not giving 100%. As they say sometimes, that he was waiting for his push, that he's kind of waiting to be pushed as a top guy before he really put some effort in. But I every time I saw a Carlito match, a solo Carlito match during this era, because there were some times like when he was in the tag team with his brother that I didn't see the effort. I see what they were talking about, but when he was first being pushed around the second time maybe that he won the Intercontinental Championship, when he got moved from SmackDown to Raw, I thought that was some of the best stuff that he was doing, because that's when he started breaking out the lucha. He hadn't been doing it before. And then I think it's crazy. One of the best Intercontinental Championship matches that people never talk about is Carlito, Shelton Benjamin, and John Morrison. I forget which event he was wrestling as Johnny Nitro at the time. But I forget what event it was. But they had a triple threat match that was absolutely badass. And it elevated all three of them. They should have been top guys. But of course, Carlito also was given this spot at the Piper's Pit, WrestleMania 21. He was given a microphone in the same ring with Roddy Piper and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And nothing ever came of it. He just flattened out. Carlito's kind of, the reputation of being lazy, I guess, is what did it. But Carlito was amazing. And a lot of people, when they saw MVP and they saw like Drew McIntyre and all these guys making a comeback, they kind of started saying, hey, where's Carlito? Because there's a reason why people wanted Carlito to come back, because he was an amazing worker, an amazing performer. Another person who was on this list, as I've mentioned, is Drew McIntyre, the winner of the 2020 Royal Rumble. The guy who was labeled the destined one, you know, the chosen one in 2007. He was like 22 or something like that at the time. He was a really young guy when he first got his initial push, when he was the Intercontinental Champion. And he just didn't get over. You know, he flopped like kind of hard. And if you flop hard in the WWE, they kind of just give up on you and they don't give a shit what you do. That's how you ended up in 3MB. You know, like it was such a harsh flop. I'm not sure if it was his fault, or it was just like, you know, he needed some more seasoning. He needed to go away and learn and change and do something, which is what he did. You know, he went away, he learned, he went to TNA, became a TNA World Champion. You're going to hear that a lot here because quite a few of these guys just became TNA World Champions, which means TNA somewhat benefited from WWE not pushing these guys. But he became TNA World Champion, and he really kind of shined as a top guy there. That's actually when I started paying attention to him again, because I really don't care to watch follow people a lot on the indies, because the indies is just, it's a mess. But Drew McIntyre had something, and everybody knew he had something at the time. He just couldn't get it out of him. And I think there was some sort of the domestic dispute that got him fired when he was in 3MB. He got shit canned, and he came back. He came back, went to NXT, worked from NXT, worked his way back up, and I hope that I can say he's a WWE champion, and I'm pretty sure he will be. They would not have, probably not have had him win the Royal Rumble if he wasn't going to be the WWE champion. Even though it has happened that guys have won the Royal Rumble and not become WWE champion, but it usually, the one I can think of off the top of my head is Shinsuke Nakamura. Most of the other guys either won the title before or shortly thereafter or something like that. But I don't think Nakamura has won any world title since winning the King of the Ring, since winning the Royal Rumble. But I think it's inevitable for him too. The next guy on the list is Lashley. Bobby Lashley debuted in 2004, 2005, maybe even 2006. No, it couldn't have been 2006, or it was in that era on the SmackDown, where he was just basically generic big muscly guy who did generic big muscly guy things. And his big claim to fame is he actually headlined WrestleMania 23. The Battle of the Billionaires. It was Umaga, who's also on this list, and versus Lashley. And Lashley was a big part of the SmackDown brand as far as being a sort of, I don't want to say monster, but he was sort of one of the top baby faces behind Batista, and had a really good feud with King Booker. He was actually the guy in the when King Booker became King Booker. He was the guy Booker T beat. He beat Lashley. And Lashley had a pretty good match with John Cena for the WWE Championship at Great American Bash 2007, I think. And I think this was after he had to give up the WWE ECW Championship. Oh, that was you're gonna hear that again too. There's like 2 or 3 other guys who won the WWE ECW title, but he had an extensive feud with Vince McMahon personally. I think there was another domestic thing with Lashley. Maybe not him having a domestic violence charge, but there were something that had to do with his wife. Like, I don't want to go into the whole gossip of it, but it had something to do with his wife, and that's why he left. But I think that if he had not left the WWE, Lashley would have been the WWE champion eventually, especially with Batista suffering all these injuries. And, the opportunity was there. But it's just unfortunate. But I'm glad he's back now, and maybe he'll finally get the title. He won the Intercontinental Championship last year from Finn Balor. Or no, he won it from Dean Ambrose. He lost it to Finn Balor. So he's had a decent. He hasn't had a decent run. Let me take that back. This whole thing with Lashley and Lana and Rusev, it's scoring high on the YouTube front, but it's not something that people really care about. It's not showing you what Lashley can really do. Like when he was a TNA champion, you could really see Lashley being Lashley. And I kind of want to see that guy in the WWE. And it doesn't seem like we're going to get that anytime soon, if we're being quite honest. All right, so another guy on this list is Shelton Benjamin. Shelton Benjamin actually debuted in like 2002. So he's like one of the old... I don't know if he's that much older than them, but he debuted in the tag team. So the reason why he's on this list is when he made his singles push in like 2004, 2005, when he became like the Intercontinental Champion. And he was a great Intercontinental Champion. And he had badass matches with Triple H. And he had this absolute classic match with Shawn Michaels on Raw. Shelton Benjamin was, they killed him. Shelton Benjamin is one of the guys where when WWE when you talk about burying guys, they buried Shelton Benjamin. The whole mama thing is an absolute burial. He was made to look fucking stupid. Okay? Look, we know Shelton Benjamin had something about him. He was incredibly athletic. You know, you could go back and watch the first Money in the Bank where he's running up the ladder, running up the side of the ladder. He's a fucking highlight reel. And they turned that guy into a mama's boy. And then they made him dye his hair blonde, and he was doing it was awful. Like all that shit was just awful. They did my boy Shelton so fucking dirty that it actually makes me so mad to talk about it. And I thought that things were going to change when he came back in like 2000 and he came back in 2016, I think. But it hasn't. He's just been an underneath guy, doing underneath guy stuff, wrestling on main event, not really doing much of anything. He still has so much to give, you know, and you could see it that there's something about him that people like him, you know. But I don't think they, you know, he's been on the back burner for so long now that I don't think anybody cares anymore. But there was something about Shelton Benjamin at the time where if they'd have put forth the effort into pushing him as a main event guy, he would have been, and he wouldn't have left. But he ended up leaving, and he didn't come back until like 2016 or something like that. But I love Shelton Benjamin. Call me whatever you want. I have a soft spot for most of these guys, which is why I'm making the video talking about them. Because when I came back to watching wrestling, these were the guys who were, you know, the Intercontinental Champion, the U.S. Champion, or whatever. You know, these were the guys that got me back watching wrestling. So I have a really soft spot for some of them. Shelton Benjamin is number one. You know, MVP and Carlito are 2 and 3. But, you know, it's the only thing is Shelton couldn't really cut promos. Probably the next one I want to talk about is probably the most pushed of these guys, and it's Chris Masters. Now, a lot of people may say, like, how was Chris Masters the most pushed? And it's like, well, if you were watching Raw at the time, they were doing the Master Lock Challenge, and Chris Masters had this unbreakable full Nelson or whatever the fuck. It was a full Nelson. And they were doing the Master Lock Challenge, and nobody could break the Master Lock. And I don't know if he was undefeated at the time, but he was just constantly featured as being a top guy but he was really young. He was like 21 or 22 or something like that. And he didn't have the mic skills or the in-ring skills that he needed to have to maintain that spot. And I remember Chris Masters is most famous to me because he is the very first victim of the STFU. That move was invented in a match with Chris Masters on Raw. It was, I remember, I think it was Eric Bischoff was the GM of Raw at the time, and he put Chris Masters in a submission match with John Cena, and John Cena did not have a submission finisher. And John Cena kind of on the fly came up with this crazy STF that was called the STFU, and Chris Masters tapped out, and that was kind of the end of Chris Masters as far as being a top guy. I think they kind of tried it a little bit, but he never really got back to prominence at all after he tapped out to John Cena. He kind of just looked like a goof after that. He just started doing the goofy titty dance thing later. When he came back, he left he left or got fired or whatever, and he came back. He was just a titty dancing guy. And Chris Masters never won anything, which is really weird because I say he's the most pushed. But if you was watching Raw at the time, you know that they really was pushing Chris Masters hard. And they really wanted Chris Masters to be a top guy. And it did not work out. As a babyface or as a heel. So it's really sad, you know. But we always have our memories. The next on the list was also very heavily pushed, but let's just talk about it. Muhammad Hassan. So Muhammad Hassan is an excellent gimmick. I do not give a fuck what you have to say. Muhammad Hassan was a fantastic gimmick. It was stereotypical, yes, but he pulled it off well. And the guy's not really an Arab, so he was playing a role, and maybe they could have did better things with it. But this guy had enough heat to work a match with Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels. Like he got over to that extent that Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels were willing to work with him. he was so over. Undertaker was willing to work with him. Undertaker ended up killing him off. And Muhammad Hassan never won anything. But much like Chris Masters, and much like probably the guy who we'll be talking about next, Muhammad Hassan was undefeated for months. And then he wrestled John Cena in a match on Raw. And John Cena just beat him. And I mean, beat him easily. Squashed him. It was like 4 minutes or some shit. 5 minutes or something like that. And then they sent Muhammad Hassan to SmackDown. They sent him to SmackDown. And shortly thereafter, Undertaker put him in a hole because they did the terrorist angle. Which, some people say it was a terrorist angle. I would say it was kind of a parallel to the Druids, where Undertaker would have the Druids carry people away, except that it kind of happened at the same time as a real life terrorist thing, and it was too close for comfort, and being a publicly traded company, WWE could not take it, so they got rid of the Muhammad Hassan character, and the guy who was playing him, I guess, just retired or just started working on the indies. He never tried to repackage and come back as anything else. The next guy I want to talk about is Umaga. Umaga was another one. I mean, undefeated, monster heel, fantastic, athletic, big guy. Intercontinental champion, had some amazing matches with Jeff Hardy. Like, if you've never watched the Jeff Hardy Umaga matches from 06, 07, they had like a series of matches which were so fucking good. If you don't believe, that's when I kind of started to believe that Jeff Hardy could be the world champion. Is when he started really wrestling Umaga. And Umaga was just an amazing athlete. And he, of course, headlined WrestleMania 23, the Battle of the Billionaires. He was Vince McMahon's chosen fist. And he lost his undefeated streak to John Cena. I believe it was at New Year's resolution or some shit, where he got beat by a roll-up or something fucking stupid like that. And then they did the rematch at the Royal Rumble, and he got choked by the top rope, and that was it. So once you get beat by John Cena, there's really nothing else for him to do with you. So he kind of moved down. That's when he started being an Intercontinental Champion and stuff. And he's also famously the guy who was a dominant Intercontinental Champion, by the way, who ended up losing the Intercontinental Championship to fucking Santino Marella, who was at the time billed as a fan from the crowd. So you had Santino, who was literally a nobody, pin Umaga, who was, the unstoppable monster heel, for the championship. And now you got this guy who was Intercontinental Champion who had never in storyline had never wrestled a match. It was absolutely fucking stupid. It's just fucking stupid. And yes, Santino had some help, but it still was fucking stupid, and it was wrong. And that's one of the reasons why this is a lost generation, because you see how fucking stupid this stuff is. You got guys, ended up in 3MB. You got fucking guys, bringing their mama to the ring, or actresses playing their mama. You got this shit. And then we're not even done. We're not done. So it's embarrassing. And unfortunately, Umaga passed away. He was still an amazing guy, as far as talent is concerned. And the Umaga character debuted in like 2005. Umaga himself might have been in WWE in 2002 with the whole 3-minute warning. I don't remember what year that was. It might have been 2003. But the Umaga character debuted in like 04 or 05. But Umaga was great, and I really liked it. Another guy on this list is Jack Swagger. So Jack Swagger, the All-American, which was silly, but he was a guy that they really tried to push. It kind of made him. Did they make him a star? Not really. They tried. He was the world heavyweight champion. He was a really pathetic world heavyweight champion. But one of the most interesting things is not only that Jack Swagger, who is currently Jake Hager in All Elite Wrestling, he won his world championship from Chris Jericho, who he is the bodyguard for now in AEW. And I like that that kind of repurposing of their relationship. But Jack Swagger was a terrible world heavyweight champion. The only thing I can remember really from Jack Swagger during that era is when he had the Eagle, and I think the Eagle is was Chavo Guerrero, but the Eagle is when, and this was honestly funny as shit, is when Jack Swagger would run around the ring with his arms out with the Eagle, and they would just go around in circles. And yes, it's stupid. If you haven't seen it, kind of envision Jack Swagger going around in circles with the Eagle, and Chavo Guerrero in a fucking Eagle suit going around in circles. It was absolutely silly. It was the only thing that made the Jack Swagger character interesting to me, because he was funny. He had that lisp. He talked weird. He looked kind of weird, but he was funny. And then when he won the World Heavyweight title, he started being super serious, and that sucked because he needed something. He couldn't just. I didn't want to watch him wrestle for 15 minutes, not without some sizzle. He needed to have some sizzle, and they killed him off. But of course, Jack Swagger, he made his big career resurgence with Zeb Coulter when they doing the anti-immigrant thing. And similarly to Muhammad Hassan, it got a little too political. And Jack Swagger then also failed the drug test. And even though he won the Elimination Chamber 03, not 03, 2013 or something like that, when he was feuding with Alberto Del Rio for the world. And I thought personally that he was going to win the World Heavyweight Championship. But, Fox News complained about, the anti-immigrant nature of the We the People stuff, which was, I guess, based on the Tea Party and the Tea Party movement, Republican movement during that time. And people complained, and they thought it was too political, so they killed it. And then it just became, I don't know what they was trying to do when they added Cesaro to it, but it still came off kind of racist because you added another white guy to the group. But I didn't care if it was racist, if we're being honest, because to me, if it's working, let it work, because I know it's not real, so I don't care, and I don't know if this reflects how the real people feel, and I'm hoping it don't. But at the same time, if you presented it to me as a wrestling character, I don't give a shit if the guy's racist. I don't give a fuck. It's a TV character. There's fucking zombies on wrestling, okay? There's guys who are supposedly been set on fire and they're still alive. You telling me a racist is too far? You telling me a racist or a guy who beats up his wife is too far when you got fucking zombies and guys running around with eagles and a fucking Mexican pretending to be white? So I don't even want to go into that one, right? So Jack Swagger kind of got screwed. I think he should have been the World Heavyweight Champion. But if he'd have beat Alberto Del Rio as a sort of quote-unquote racist character, it would have been the stock price. We could talk about the stock price some other time. But another guy, probably the last 2 or 3 guys, well, just 2. There's only 2 left that I can think of. And these are the top 2 guys, the guys who did the best. CM Punk. Now, what do I need to say about CM Punk, really? The guy won every championship in the company except maybe the U.S. title. Won Money in the Bank. Was very close to winning the Royal Rumble. Headliner WrestleMania with Chris Jericho and Undertaker. And he just did everything between 2006 and 2014. He was just a fantastic worker. Was he the best, most athletic guy of that group? No. Was he the best talker? He felt the most natural. I do think that other people were probably better talkers than him, but they never really got the opportunity to really go out there. Like, MVP and Carlito never really got the chances that CM Punk had. I'm not saying that they would have broken through the mainstream the same way, but they obviously weren't given the same opportunities. So it's hard to say that, he is the best. Mr. Kennedy had a far more over microphone act, but CM Punk is known for the pipe bomb, and you only need to do it once. Doing it 100 times and never getting anywhere versus doing it once and making it. I mean, that's pretty important. He got the feud with The Rock. He got the feud with Undertaker. He got the feud with, Daniel Bryan, and we got what we needed out of CM Punk, I think. And the only thing we really kind of missing is a CM Punk Edge or a CM Punk AJ Styles feud. But we got what we needed, really. We got several matches with Daniel Bryan and John Cena, and there's really isn't anybody except maybe Seth Rollins that I can think of that I would care to see him wrestle today. And the last guy on the list is Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston, the WWE champion. He won the WWE title in 2019. He had been in the WWE for 11 years, so that means he debuted in 2008. So he was, came in as the Jamaican me crazy, the fake Jamaican, and he was always over. Like Kofi Kingston was always over, but he was never going to be the top guy as that act. He was skinny. They didn't give him a lot of mic time, so he was just kind of high energy all the time. He was just high energy black dude, kind of like Coco Beware was, and that doesn't really work out. Like being the WWE's high energy guy, that sucks. That's not going to work, especially if you're black. So, because you can just be black high energy guy all day, and that doesn't mean anything. But Kofi Kingston became the WWE champion. See, he sort of fulfilled. He validated his entire career. He stuck around. He was the only guy that never left and never got fired. Kofi was there consistently. CM Punk quit. He left. Drew McIntyre got fired. Kofi was the only one that from this generation that I could think of that stayed around. Oh, wait, did I talk about John Morrison? I don't think I talked about John Morrison, who also returned recently. So John Morrison is the last guy I want to talk about. I'm pretty sure I didn't talk about John Morrison yet. But Johnny Nitro, he actually debuted from Tough Enough. Now, he was the first Tough Enough winner. He used to go the whole naming himself after shows thing kind of started there when he was Johnny Nitro. He was named by Eric Bischoff. And then he became John Morrison when he moved to ECW, when he became the ECW champion. The WWE ECW champion, let's say. He had this fantastic feud with CM Punk, even though it was fantastic in ring and not exactly fantastic on the mic, because John Morrison was very stiff on the microphone, because he was one of those guys that was paid very close attention to what they told him to say, and he seemed very out of his element saying anything else. But he ended up leaving in 2011 or something like that. But John Morrison had some pretty good moments. I remember he had some really great matches with Rey Mysterio on SmackDown for the Intercontinental Championship. I mentioned the triple threat that he had with Carlito and Shelton Benjamin. And he just returned last year on SmackDown. Or was it this year? I don't remember. But these guys could have been the backbone of the company. John Morrison is a TNA champion. He was a AAA mega champion. He's just he had a lot. He was very athletic. I'm not so sure about his microphone skills, but he should have been there too. And I think that eventually we're going to get around to him feuding with The Miz, because that's who he was feuding with when he left. He was having issues with The Miz, who was the WWE champion at the time, believe it or not. And I also could talk about The Miz, who was in this generation, who debuted in 2005 or 2006 from Tough Enough. So The Miz is a guy who was, contemporaries of all these guys. He was struggling. The Miz sucked. The Miz was the worst, one of the worst guys ever. I remember plain as day. I do all this stuff off the top of my head because I want y'all to know how much of this shit I can actually remember and how much of this stuff, because I don't like to do a lot of research unless, because I went through college, so I'm kind of burned out on research. So I do this shit off the top of my head. And also, it feels better for you guys to actually plug in things like, oh, you missed this, you missed that. But The Miz, I remember plain as day. The Miz blanked out during the Diva Search. He was doing a Diva Search moment where he was introducing all the divas for the Diva Search or whatever, and his brain just blanked. And he was just in there. I was like, oh my God. It was the most painful. To this day, it's probably the most painful promo moment I have ever seen in wrestling. Period. Talk about somebody forgetting their lines. I'm talking this guy not only forgot his lines, I don't even think he knew where he was. And that guy became the WWE champion. That's just hard work, man. Like you show up to work every day, you put the work in, you change your look, you change your work ethic, you change everything. Now that Miz is one of the best mic workers, in the business. He's still not that great of a wrestler, but he works the microphone like nobody's fucking business. And he was great. Now, off the top of my head, those are the guys I had written down. I didn't write down The Miz. So, but there are not that I've talked about The Miz, there are other guys I could talk about. Dolph Ziggler is another one. Dolph Ziggler debuted in the Spirit Squad in like 2005 or 2006 as Nikki. God, I feel so stupid if he wasn't Nikki. But his name is Nick, so I'm pretty sure he was Nikki. And then he came back with this shitty name, Dolph Ziggler, and he was doing the handshake gimmick, and it was god fucking awful. Let's be honest. The initial Dolph Ziggler incarnation was so bad. It was really bad stuff. Like the name, I thought eventually they were gonna move him away from the name, but here it is, over 10 fucking years later, and his name is still Dolph Ziggler. Like, that's so bad. Like, that name sucks. Okay, and maybe that name is the reason why he hasn't really gotten where he needed to be. But Dolph is a consistently pushed guy. Dolph never left. Dolph never got fired. He never was. He got injured at the worst possible moment when he was the world heavyweight champion. He got hurt, but they had been trying to push and push and push to get him to that point. He was a guy that really wanted to get there. They were doing kind of a fall, Mr. Perfect gimmick with there. When he was doing the whole perfection, that stuff, and then he started doing all the shit with Vicky Guerrero. By the by, anything that had something to do with people kissing Vicky Guerrero is fucking awful. I hated every bit of it. I didn't give a fuck who it was. If you were making out with Vicky Guerrero, I fucking hated it. Every second of it. But Dolph ended up getting to that level, I guess, and then people kind of got burned out on Dolph in like 2016. They figured, hey, this guy's never going to be the world WWE champion. He's never going to be world champion again. We don't give a fuck about what he does. And so he kind of gets crowd reactions because people like him, but he's not getting the reaction that a guy who's been in WWE for 10 years, he's not getting the reaction those guys should get. He's certainly not getting the reactions that Kofi gets or CM Punk. He's not getting those reactions, and it's unfortunate, but that's because WWE constantly kept pulling the rug out from under him. If they'd have let Dolph run, I think he eventually would have gotten there. Let's see who else. Let's see Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder's another one. He's been around forever. Woo woo woo. But I think he's been around at least 10 years because he came in as an edgehead with Kurt Hawkins. Kurt Hawkins actually got released and came back. Kurt Hawkins is not worth talking about because he never did anything. But Zack Ryder has been the Intercontinental Champion, has been the United States Champion. Zack Ryder chants have disrupted the Rock promo. There was a time where Zack Ryder was one of the most over guys in the business. Not so much anymore, but he was one of those guys, And I don't think, let's just talk about that for a minute. I don't think Zack Ryder would have ever been a WWE champion anyway, because the character is too silly. And a lot of people think that, oh, Zack, you gotta push him and push him and push him. I'm like, no, you can't. People like certain things. When somebody likes something, you kind of have to give it to them in the way that they like it. Like, people like cake, right? But you don't replace pizza with cake. You don't replace steak with cake. You don't. Some people may say, well, I'll take cake sometimes. I'll take cake. But that's what Zack Ryder was. Like, Zack Ryder was cake. He was silly. He was funny. He had a good personality. But there's no way you would have believed it. And anybody who tells you that they would have is a fucking liar. That if you put Zack Ryder in the ring with Daniel Bryan or CM Punk or Undertaker, and we just thought, oh, he fit perfectly in that role. No, he fucking didn't. He fits as what he was, a mid-card, maybe even a higher level mid-card babyface. That's it. To think that he should have been the WWE champion, winning the Royal Rumble, main event in WrestleMania because he sold a bunch of fucking t-shirts, it's like, no, he's cake. People like cake, but they like cake to be cake. They like cake as dessert. They don't want to. They're not tuning in just to see Zack fucking Ryder. And then Zack Ryder character was not able to bring out that intensity that was necessary to make him a viable main event guy. Okay, so I got my Zack Ryder rant out. I was going to make a different video to talk about people who really want to push the Zack Ryder meme, but stop it. Just stop it. I heard the Arn Anderson thing about Arn Anderson talking about, well, the company should have put. No. Sometimes people know what they're doing. Santino Marella, who is also a part of this group because I mentioned him earlier, he was also cake. He was a guy where they was doing the gimmick where they had Santino as the last guy in the Royal Rumble in 2012. Not 12. 13. Not 13. Was it 13? But whatever. Royal Rumble, Alberto Del Rio won, which I'm pretty sure was 2013. He was the last guy in the ring. Nobody believed Santino was actually going to win. Now, the crowd was up. You know, they were like, yay, Santino could win. But if Santino would have won that match, come on. Honestly, if Santino would have won that match, would you have been happy? You'd have been happy all of 5 minutes. And then you would have said, oh, they're about to do something to get the fucking title shot off of him because he didn't deserve to be there. They also did that same gimmick again the next month where they did Santino as one of the last guys in the Elimination Chamber. And it was like, come on, man. It's cool, but he's also cake. He is a comedy act who got over being a comedy act. And people sometimes want to see the comedy acts win. But we don't want to see the comedy acts as a top guy. He can't be the central figure. The central figure, like John Cena, can do comedy, but he can't be a comedy act. So I think I talked about a lot of these guys off the top of my head. Another interesting one, this is probably going to be the last guy I mentioned, is Ken Doane, who ended up being getting shit canned out of the WWE. But he was the leader of the Spirit Squad. They was really pushing him a lot. I remember Kenny having one-on-one matches with John Cena for the title and coming up just short and really looking good in those matches. But he and Cena had some backstage issues, let's say. I don't want to get into the gossip of it, but he ended up getting fired. And he hasn't been, as far as I know, he hasn't been back since. So it's been like since 2008, maybe. I don't know. But I know the Spirit Squad had a pretty decent run, and Kenny was. They still do the Spirit Squad. They were doing the Spirit Squad in Major League Wrestling, MLW, recently in 2019 or 2020. But I'm not sure they're still doing it anymore. But Kenny was a guy that they were pushing for a while, and they really thought was going to be something. But it just never turned out. All right. Let me stop talking so much. If you guys like this, like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to add some people that I might have missed. Because I know, people might be saying, like, what about Luther Reigns? Like, who the fuck cares about him? Who the fuck cares about Kenzo Suzuki or, what's that other, the French guy, Sylvain Grenier and Rene Dupree. Nobody gives a fuck about them guys. They were never going to be top guys. The point is, I'm talking about guys who could have been top guys and maybe were on the cusp, not permanently mid-card. You're never going to fucking do anything ever because you're not good, because you suck. Guys like fucking Sylvain Grenier. And I don't give a fuck that he works in WWE now. I don't care. All right, so like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to comment. Feel free to disagree if you want to disagree with me. If I got something wrong, please let me know. Correct me in the comments. I will probably never do research unless I absolutely have to. So I'll have to do everything off the top of my head, and my memory is kind of shitty. So again, like, share, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.